Have you ever lain awake at night, your mind spinning, your heart pounding as though danger lurked in the room? Perhaps you imagine walking into the office tomorrow, only to freeze in front of your colleagues. Or you picture receiving an email that announces layoffs, your name on the list. Maybe you relive a mistake from last week, convinced that everyone remembers it and judges you for it. These thoughts feel real, so real they can drain your energy, even though nothing has happened yet. Fear lives in the imagination, and it often punishes us before life ever does. The Stoics saw this clearly. Our minds create prisons, and fear is the warden. In today's world, fear dominates the workplace. Deadlines tighten around us like iron bands. Presentations feel like battles in front of silent judges. Promotions dangle like distant prizes, while job security trembles with every company shift. Each email notification carries the possibility of bad news. Each meeting feels like an exam where one wrong answer could undo months of effort. And beneath it all, the silent whisper, "What if I fail?" Fear does not need to come true to ruin us. It only needs to hold our attention. And in a distracted, high-pressure environment, fear thrives. If you feel this way, you are not alone. The brightest professionals, the most accomplished leaders, admit quietly that fear and anxiety drain their joy. A talented employee might dread speaking in a meeting more than doing the actual work. A skilled manager may lose sleep before giving feedback to their team. Even people who appear confident from the outside can battle storms of fear within. You are not weak for struggling. Fear is not a flaw in your character. It is part of being human. The Stoics did not judge people for feeling fear. Instead, they sought methods to master it. But what if there was a way to face fear directly, to strip it of its claws? What if instead of running from it, you could turn toward it, examine it, and even learn from it? Imagine standing in front of the shadow that terrifies you and realizing it is smaller than you thought. Imagine fear no longer dictating your choices, but becoming the very force that sharpens your courage. This is not fantasy. It is a practice, one that the Stoics used for centuries to train their minds and hearts. 2,000 years ago, Stoic philosophers like Seneca and Epictetus developed a radical mental exercise. They called it premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. Instead of ignoring fear, they brought it into focus. They deliberately imagined the worst-case scenario, poverty, exile, loss, humiliation, and asked, "Could I endure this?" The exercise was not meant to depress, but to strengthen. By confronting fear in the mind, they discovered freedom in reality. If the worst could be faced in thought, then anything less was manageable. In this video, we will uncover 7 timeless lessons from the practice of negative visualization. You will see how to name your fears, rehearse the worst with wisdom, and emerge stronger. You will learn how to use this exercise not only in moments of crisis, but in everyday work, before meetings, during deadlines, in the quiet hours of doubt. By the end, you will carry with you tools the Stoics used to master themselves. Tools that can transform fear from an enemy into a teacher and from a burden into resilience. Stay with me, and let us begin this journey into courage. The first step to mastering fear is to name it. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Fear that remains unspoken grows wild, like a monster in the dark. But when you say it out loud, "I am afraid of losing my job. I fear looking foolish in front of others," suddenly the shadow has edges. It is no longer endless. It becomes something you can face. Left unspoken, fear grows like a shadow monster. But once you describe it clearly, you see its edges and realize it is not infinite. Fear thrives in vagueness, but clarity cuts it down to size. Like fog that vanishes in sunlight, fear loses its grip under the discipline of words. Imagine a Roman merchant fearing bankruptcy. In his mind, ruin stretched forever. But when he named his fear clearly, "I may lose my cargo," he saw its limit. He could still rebuild, still earn, still live. The fear shrank. What once seemed like death became a setback. Naming the fear transformed despair into a challenge. Today, Many professionals avoid naming fears. Before a presentation, they think vaguely, what if I fail? The vagueness amplifies dread. But if you write it down, I might forget a slide. The fear becomes specific, manageable, solvable. You can practice, use notes, prepare. Suddenly, fear is not a prison, but a signal. In companies today, leaders use a method called the pre-mortem. They imagine their project has failed and ask, what went wrong? By naming risks in advance, panic is diffused and preparation replaces anxiety. Fear becomes strategy. Fear thrives in silence. Speak it, write it, name it, and you will discover that most monsters vanish when brought into the light. What once held you captive becomes powerless the moment you confront it with words. The second step is to imagine the worst to free yourself. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Instead of avoiding fearful thoughts, they invited them in. They imagined the worst-case scenario and asked, what then? If exile came, could they endure? If poverty struck, could they survive? By rehearsing disaster in the mind, they stripped fear of its surprise. Fear multiplies when vague. But when you deliberately imagine the worst, you prepare for it and discover you could still endure. The act of seeing disaster clearly disarms it. What once seemed unbearable becomes survivable when rehearsed in thought. Seneca advised his students to rehearse poverty, eat coarse bread, wear rough clothes, and say, is this what I feared? By living the scenario, they learned it was survivable. What once caused dread transformed into gratitude. By practicing loss, they discovered strength. In modern work, try it. If I fail this presentation, what happens? Perhaps embarrassment. But will you still have your skills, your colleagues, your career? Almost certainly yes. Suddenly, the catastrophe shrinks. You are free to act boldly, knowing the worst is not the end. Fear loses power when tested. Like cold water, it shocks at first, but you adapt quickly. The practice of imagining worst-case scenarios is like stepping into that water every day. With time, you find it is not lethal, but refreshing, strengthening. Entrepreneurs use this method constantly. Before launching, they ask, if this fails, what happens? They imagine losing money, closing the business, starting over. And once they realize they could rebuild, they act with courage. Freedom comes from knowing you can survive the worst. Fear enslaves when avoided, but when faced directly, it transforms. The cold water of fear shocks you at first, but soon you adapt. What was terrifying becomes fuel for courage. Fear becomes not your enemy, but your ally. Our third lesson: rehearse loss to deepen gratitude. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to imagine that everything he loved could be gone tomorrow, not to wallow in sadness, but to love more fiercely while it is here. This practice shocks us into presence. When you realize your health, your work, your family are not guaranteed, they suddenly shine brighter. Seneca often reminded his students, you may part from your friend at any moment, so hold them dear today. The Romans lived with plagues, sudden war, unpredictable fate. By rehearsing loss, they treasured presence. A friend's smile became more precious. A simple meal became a feast. A sunrise became a gift. At first, this seems dark. Why think of losing what you love? But the opposite is true. Negative visualization awakens joy. When you imagine losing your morning coffee, your walk to work, your child's laughter, you realize how rich you already are. Gratitude grows not from having more, but from realizing what could be lost. In the workplace, try it with your job. Imagine, for a moment, that the company shut down tomorrow. How would you feel walking out of the building for the last time? Suddenly, even the small frustrations, emails, meetings, deadlines, become signs of opportunity. You realize, I get to do this today. Gratitude turns obligation into privilege. With people, the effect is even stronger. Imagine that this conversation with a loved one might be the last. Harsh, perhaps. But what changes? You listen more deeply. You speak more kindly. You forgive faster. Love becomes sharper when framed by impermanence. Loss rehearsed in thought deepens love in life. When you practice this, every ordinary moment transforms into treasure. The Stoics remind us, Mortality is not a curse, but the lens that makes life beautiful. Gratitude is born from remembering how fragile everything truly is. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most liberating. Accept fate and embrace freedom. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, accept whatever comes woven into the pattern of your destiny. It sounds passive, but it is the opposite. By embracing what happens, you stop fighting against reality. The wasted energy of resistance becomes the fuel of action. Think of Marcus during the Antonine Plague. As emperor, he watched thousands die each day. He could not wish it away. Yet instead of despair, he turned to duty. He wrote, reflected, and governed with clarity. Fate had dealt him plague, betrayal, and war, yet he accepted them as part of his role, and this freed him to act wisely. How often do we waste energy wishing things were different? I wish the project hadn't failed. I wish my boss were kinder. I wish I didn't have to work late. Each wish fights against what already is. The Stoics ask, why wrestle with the unchangeable? To embrace fate is to say, this is what is. How will I respond? In the office, this principle is revolutionary. A deal falls through, a colleague betrays trust, a policy changes beyond your control. You can resist and complain, or you can accept and adapt. The moment you say yes to reality, your mind is free to focus on solutions. What others waste in resentment, you invest in progress. Athletes know this instinctively. A sudden storm cancels the game. A referee makes a bad call. They cannot undo it. But champions embrace it. This too is part of the game. In doing so, they channel energy into the next play instead of lamenting the last. Acceptance becomes momentum. To love fate does not mean to love pain for its own sake. It means to love life as it comes, whole and unfiltered. When you embrace fate, fear loses its grip. Because whatever arrives, success or failure, joy or sorrow, you can say, this too is mine. In acceptance, you discover invincibility. The fifth lesson is simple but powerful. Build courage through small trials. The Stoics taught that bravery is not forged in a single heroic act, but in daily exercises of resilience. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that life's challenges are training. Each obstacle, however small, is a chance to prepare for greater ones. By facing discomfort in controlled doses, you become unshakable when true storms arrive. Epictetus, once a slave, trained himself by deliberately enduring hardship. He ate simple meals, slept on rough surfaces, and practiced silence in arguments. Each act was a rehearsal. He said, difficulties show what men are. Like muscles strengthened by lifting weights, courage grows by lifting burdens we choose. Small trials today prepare us for the heavy ones tomorrow. Fear overwhelms us most when we are unprepared. The one who avoids all discomfort trembles at the first hint of pain. But the one who practices discipline, missing a meal, walking in the cold, speaking the unpopular truth, becomes familiar with hardship. Familiarity breeds calm. Fear shrinks when it meets experience. In the modern office, small trials are everywhere. Volunteering to present when you'd rather hide. Asking a difficult question in a meeting. Choosing to give honest feedback instead of staying silent. Each time you face discomfort, you train courage. These are not grand battles, but they build the same muscle. Step by step, you become the colleague who does not flinch. Consider public speaking. Most fear it more than death. But the only way through is to practice in smaller doses, speaking to one colleague, then to 5, then to a room. Each trial builds tolerance, until fear fades into confidence. This is how leaders are made, not by avoiding fear, but by meeting it in manageable steps. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Each small trial we face makes the next less daunting. Fear feeds on avoidance, but courage feeds on action. And the more we act, the more fear starves. Try this yourself. Take cold showers for a week. Leave your phone behind during a walk. Speak an unpopular truth kindly, but firmly. These are rehearsals. They do not destroy you. they strengthen you. And when larger fears come, conflict, rejection, uncertainty, you will not be caught untrained. You will already know how to stand. Courage is not born in the grand moment. It is built in the quiet choices of daily life. Practice small trials, and when the great test comes, you will already be prepared. What once seemed terrifying will feel like just another step on a path you have walked many times before. This is how ordinary days forge extraordinary strength. The sixth lesson is to see fear not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Fear points toward growth. Wherever you feel resistance, speaking in public, asking for feedback, making a bold decision, that is where your training lies. To reject fear is to reject your own development. To listen to fear is to uncover the exact lessons you need. Epictetus, born a slave, endured years of hardship. When his master twisted his leg, he calmly said, "You will break it." And it was broken. But instead of bitterness, he used pain as his teacher. His suffering revealed inner strength. He concluded, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." Fear and hardship were not curses to him. They were classrooms for the soul. Think of fear as an alarm bell. It rings when you approach the edge of your comfort zone. Most people turn back, but the Stoics would lean in. The bell doesn't mean stop. It means learn. Fear reveals the exact point where you can grow stronger, braver, freer. Without fear, you would remain in place, stagnant. With fear as teacher, you are always expanding. In the workplace, fear often points to opportunity. Are you afraid to present your idea? That is your teacher. Prepare, speak, improve. Afraid to negotiate salary? That is your teacher. Practice courage in asking for your worth. Afraid to admit a mistake? That is your teacher. Build honesty and humility. Fear highlights the exact skills you must sharpen. Each lesson learned removes one more chain. Consider athletes and performers. Before a big event, fear tightens their chest, dries their mouth, makes their heart race. They could curse it, but many learn to see fear as fuel. The adrenaline sharpens their focus, heightens their senses, drives them to peak performance. The same signal that could paralyze becomes a teacher of energy and readiness. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." Fear is not weakness, it is exercise. Just as muscles ache when they grow, the mind trembles when it learns. Each fearful moment you enter is a gymnasium for the soul. Every repetition makes you stronger. Practice this yourself. When fear whispers, don't speak. Practice speaking. When fear says, don't try. Practice trying. When fear says, don't love, you might lose. Practice loving anyway. Each time, you prove to yourself that fear is not your master. It is your trainer, shaping you into someone braver. Fear is not here to destroy you. It is here to shape you. Do not curse it. Do not run from it. Thank it. Learn from it. And with each lesson, you become freer. Fear is no longer your enemy. It is your most faithful teacher. The seventh and final lesson is this: freedom lies in perspective. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that events are not what disturb us. It is our judgment of them. Two people can face the same situation. One breaks under fear, the other grows stronger. The difference lies not in fate, but in perspective. Change the lens, and you change your life. Imagine two Roman soldiers sent into the freezing northern frontier. One curses the cold, dreams only of home, and suffers twice, once from the frost and once from his resentment. The other accepts the cold as training, a chance to grow tougher, more resilient. Same frost, same camp, different experience. The only difference, perspective. Fear often multiplies because of the story we tell ourselves. A failed meeting becomes the end of my career. A rejection becomes proof I am worthless. But if you change the frame, this meeting is practice, this rejection is redirection, then fear loses its sting. What once felt unbearable becomes bearable. Perspective transforms pain into progress. In the modern workplace, perspective is power. When a project collapses, some see only failure. Others see data, feedback, a step toward refinement. When layoffs come, some see only despair. Others see opportunity for reinvention. The same event, yet the meaning changes with the story you choose. Fear subsides when you tell a better story. Athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, those who endure setbacks often say, "This was not the end, but a lesson." Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Many would have quit. He saw rejection as fuel. History knows the result. Fear did not vanish, but perspective turned it into a stepping stone. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Perspective is the bridge between fear and freedom. You cannot always control events, but you can always choose the meaning you assign to them. That choice is your ultimate freedom. Freedom does not come from a world without danger. It comes from a mind trained to see clearly. When fear arises, you can ask, "What story am I telling myself?" And then you can choose a new one. Change the lens, and life itself changes. This is the Stoic gift, the power to find freedom not in circumstances, but in perspective. We have walked through 7 lessons. Name your fears, and they shrink. Imagine the worst, and fear loses surprise. Rehearse loss, and gratitude grows. Accept fate, and you find freedom. Face small trials, and courage strengthens. Learn from fear, and it becomes your teacher. Choose your perspective, and you reclaim your life. These are not abstract ideas. They are practical tools, tested for 2,000 years and still alive today. Fear will never disappear from the human experience. The Stoics did not promise a life without storms. Instead, they showed how to sail through storms with a steady hand. Imagine the difference. One person tossed helplessly by waves of anxiety, another steering calmly with courage and clarity. The seas are the same, but the sailor's mind makes all the difference. You too can be that sailor. You may not command armies or empires like Marcus Aurelius, but you command your mind. The empire within is greater than any throne. The courage you practice each day, at your desk, in meetings, in your conversations, this is the training ground for freedom. Here is your challenge. Tonight, take 10 minutes. Write down one fear that lingers in your mind. Imagine the worst outcome. Ask yourself, could I endure this? What would I still have left? What would I learn? This exercise is simple, but do it sincerely. Tomorrow, carry this mindset into one moment at work or in life. Test it. Let fear reveal its true size. Each time you practice, fear loses one more chain. Each time you embrace it, resilience grows. Soon, you will find that fear is no longer a tyrant, but a teacher. And in that moment, you will realize something profound. You are freer than you ever thought. This is the power of negative visualization. This is the path of the Stoics. And this is the way to build an unshakable mind. Thank you for watching. If you found value here, share it with someone who battles fear. And remember, strength is not in avoiding fear, but in facing it with wisdom.